Welcome, and thank you for joining today's Openspan webinar, Visibility into the Invisible, Uncovering Hidden Capacity Within Your Workforce. My name is Ron Kilgo. I'm the Senior Business Architect at Openspan, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Before I introduce today's speakers, there are a few housekeeping items that I want to share with you. During today's webinar, all participants will be in listen-only mode. We will be fielding questions at the end of the webinar, so if you have a question, please enter those in the Q&A window. We will address as many questions as possible and as time allows. Today's session is being recorded, and we will be sending the recording along with the PowerPoint slides to you following the webinar. And now I'd like to introduce the speakers. As Vice President of Continuous Improvement and Internal Audits, Covenant Transportation's Doug Schreyer oversees all analytics related to all parts of the transportation and logistics management company's operational performance. Mr. Schreyer has an extensive background in lean management consulting as well as Six Sigma initiatives. The business units that Mr. Schreyer leads are responsible for ensuring all aspects of the customer experience are of the highest quality, and the analytics used to run their business provide action-oriented intelligence that can be used to continuously improve the way the business is conducted to drive profits and minimize costs. Scott Merritt, Vice President of Global Sales for Openspan Intelligence, has 20 years experience in the enterprise technology, serving in both consultant and sales leadership roles. Prior to joining Openspan, Merritt worked as a lean process consultant for Guidon Performance Solutions, where he led a number of process reengineering engagements with several Fortune 50 companies. Merritt earned his Lean Six Sigma Black Belt certification over the course of his 10-year tenure at Cardinal Health in the finance, supply chain, and operations business units. So several of the topics we're going to be covering today. First of all, we're going to introduce some of the Openspan workforce intelligence concepts. We'll be using a fairly modern metaphor to do that. We're going to get through that pretty quickly so that we can allow Doug to talk about the dramatic improvement he's been able to drive at Covenant Transport using some of these technologies. And then we're going to wrap it all together and explore the applicability in the front office, back office, and contact center and the ways that the intelligence product can be used there. So without any further delay, just want to kick this off, and this is going to be loose, so Doug and Scott, as y'all see fit to jump in and illustrate any of these points, feel free. Otherwise, I'll be passing off some of the slides to you guys. But as a lot of people on the phone know, when you start looking at the capacity of a work organization, you have to answer three basic questions. Are my people working? It's amazing to me how many times I've gone into an organization and seen lots of people doing stuff that has nothing to do with work. When they are working, what are they working on? And then, of course, are they doing it well? Until you answer these three questions, you can't really get a handle on the capacity measures and the ability to unleash more capacity within your environment. Not only that, when you're focused on the workers, there's still things in the environment that will impact. You've got your technology. Sometimes it's old, it's legacy technology, and it's hard for the workers to get through. There's all kinds of network and computing infrastructure. Any issues, delays, or downtime in any of these systems are going to cause dramatic impact. So how do you prove capacity? Scott, you talk about this slide a lot. We'd always love to hire more staff to get things up, but that's not always an option, is it?
Yeah, no, this is obviously it would be number one on everybody's list, but as you go through budgeting season, which most folks are in right now, hiring more staff is always the ask, but it's the first thing to get pulled away, and typically it's do more with less, right?
Yep. So what do you do?
Second option is really recapture time spent on non-production work. So that's really the, where are people spending their time, kind of getting into the question you asked earlier, right? You need to know where people are spending their time. In today's world, it's, typically on the desktop, but oftentimes in back office, we see people spending a great deal of time, sometimes 30 to 40% not on the desktop, but actually doing other work. Might be computer-based training, or maybe just training off the computer, but it might also be in meetings and other stand-up things that are happening when they're not doing their normal production work. So the idea is truly try and understand what's happening throughout their entire 8-hour day. Once you understand what's happening, then you could actually start making an impact and driving improvements.
I always think of the colleague I had several years back that used to spend hours planning his vacation, and it looked like he was doing something worthwhile in the scheduling system, but it wasn't really adding to the value of the company. Absolutely.
The third is really improving productivity through a couple ways, right? Better use of the tools provided. So, it's amazing. You and I have done about 20 different assessments this year alone. As we go in and we look at the desktops, the true tools that these folks are using to do their work, it's amazing they're able to accomplish the task at hand, right? It's amazing they're able to process a claim. It's amazing they're able to take a call and actually have a conversation with the customer while they're navigating through all these different applications. So it's not just having them work smarter in those tools, it's really asking, the IT teams, the organization, are these the best tools that we can provide our agents and back office workers? So it's not always pointing to the individuals doing the work, it's really looking at their tool set and is this optimum for them to do their work. And then working faster. This is the first thing that we'll tell our teams, or you hear people tell their teams, is you just got to do it more, you got to do it faster, and you got to use the same technology and tools that you have. Well, you've got to look beneath that and understand, how do we change the game a little bit? How do we give them a new process capability that will allow them to work faster, not just how do I get off the phone quicker so I can reduce my average handle time and take more calls, right? And then finally, number 4, removing the obstacles. So we're always pointing to our agents or our back office teams to work faster or use their tools better, but we've got to look into the organization to remove a lot of the obstacles and hurdles. So are these applications, we call it kind of a hurdle index, right? What's the hurdle index for a particular process? How long does it take them? How many navigation steps do they have? How many applications do they have to use to actually work through one particular process? So removing those hurdles from that desktop, from their processes, will also give you an opportunity to drive and free up capacity. So a lot of great levers you can pull here, but historically it's just been work smarter, faster.
Yep, and the data sources that a lot of these groups use to understand what's going on the desktop, what's going on with the workers, they're often there not because they're directed at the worker, but they're often the only source that these people have. So anybody that's been around contact centers for a while knows the great data that you get from an ACD, but it basically just shows you the change in agent state. I'm ready to take a call, I'm on a call, I'm doing after-call work, I'm doing training. But you also have outputs from other systems that give you counts. So I could, Salesforce.com, I could get a count of number of interactions, number of new leads, but it doesn't really tell me all the work that I had to do to make that lead and to establish that new contact. So snapshots in time from a bunch of different sources, counts only, no real ability to weigh the work. You often can't go back and look at something. Once it's gone, right? Small data subsets, there's a lot of self-reporting, and that self-reporting has its own issues. So there's just bits and pieces of the story, as you see from these photographs, that the managers and the workers are required to put together in their own mind to try and get a vision of the truth.
Yeah, and whether you're building out a business case or trying to look at new opportunities to improve, some of the efficiencies, you and I have been there. We've done the shadowing. We've done the, observation over-the-shoulder work. We've worked with companies that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with consulting groups to try and give them that picture and paint the story. But I think what you end up, right, is, a few sample use cases, a few sample observations extrapolated out into the population, and, your assessment, although consultants will do a great job to make it look prettier than this, but really if you, look to under the covers, this is the kind of data architecture that you'd see. Is there's just too much going on. There's bits and pieces of different data from different technologies, all in an attempt to tell really the 3 basic questions that you asked up front around capacity.
You have to be a detective to be able to piece this together in your own mind.
Yep, absolutely.
the bias that's implied in that, not only from the person who's doing the detective work, but all the data elements have a lot of bias in. They're incomplete pictures, very subjective. Now, as we were getting ready for this webinar, we were intrigued by a piece of technology we became familiar with called the Lytro. Some of our viewers have probably seen this before. This is a camera that basically, when you take a picture with it, you point it in a direction and you take a picture, you don't have to focus. So you don't have to know what you're looking for in advance. It's just something in that area. So you could see something close in the foreground. You can also see something far back. It captures the entire field of light. So when you think about that and you apply it to a work environment, you may have a great many workers. If you use common methods that you have today, you can get an overall snapshot, but it doesn't give you any granularity, and you don't have the ability to move around and shift that focus, shift it backwards and forwards, or even zoom in on a single individual. With the Openspan Workforce Intelligence, you have the ability to capture once all the activity on the desktop, so I can get my operational metrics. I can capture continually, so I don't have to just be there. I don't have to camp out, be in somebody's cubicle to see something, or send a slew of workers in there to do the observations. So there's no gap in the data. It's digitized. It's put into our proprietary data warehouse format so that we can go in and mine using data methods. That means that I can go in and take a snapshot of what 1,000 people did over 3 days without having to go in and look at call recordings or listen to call recordings, do side-by-side observations. I can use data methods to get a complete picture of what's going on. And the ability, like that Lytro camera, to refocus anytime, to zoom in and out. Because we capture everything, we capture all the field of activity, we can go in and do root cause analysis after the fact, not even knowing what we needed to look for in advance, but the data is there. So this allows you to know the dance between your workers, their desktop, the applications, and the network all in one place without having a staff of people doing these very convoluted joins. So when you think about it, starting at the macro level, this is where the rubber meets the road for the worker. They're on the desktop. They're using a variety of applications. All of that stuff is visible and shown in context as things come in and out of focus with workforce intelligence, but you can really drill in and see what's going on this screen, what's going on during this particular activity. Is there value-add work being performed here? What kind of errors were experienced? So you get the depth of everything that's going on within that application, how the worker is interacting with the technology, and how the technology is responding back to the worker right there on the worker's desktop. And it's not just what's evident on a screen or what's evident by the click stream that the worker's initiating, the processes, the executables behind the scenes, the other things that are going on that desktop environment, it's all recorded. And we write that data to the cloud. Now, the cloud provides us a lot of advantages. Scott, you talk about these a lot.
Yeah, I think, for us, and as we've looked at our analytics product, we've come from a place where we required a very heavy infrastructure, many years ago that we required customers to set up and purchase and a place to be able to house all of that data. And, of course, as other companies have done, leveraging the cloud gives us complete flexibility and scalability to say, well, what if we did capture everything all the time? What if we didn't just care about the text on the screen or a particular application, but what if we actually got in deeper and understood everything about that application? What if we understood when it's working, when it's not working, what kind of error rates, when it loses focus, gets in focus, every mouse click. So what the cloud provides us as other companies, right, is the ability to take all of that data, that one picture, and make that picture continuous and push that data up into the cloud and then be able to understand what's happening across the entire enterprise by leveraging a lot of the algorithms and proprietary technology to start making sense of that big desktop data.
Scott, as you know, Openspan, yep, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I love your example of the recent bank you were at talking about the security of the cloud, too, because when we talk about grabbing all of this data, that's the first thing that comes up. But I thought you had a good story the other day that you shared.
Yep, and it's this bank's actually been a customer of ours for a while and has used some of our other analytics technology. When we told them about the additional value add that we could provide to the raw data, the analysis, the true intelligence that we can provide now on top of that great visibility, and we were talking about how we store it and where we store it using Amazon Web Services, they laughed. And I said, is there a problem with web services? And they said, no, we just did an internal audit and an audit of Amazon. Amazon came out far more secure than our own internal web facility, so we have no problem with the cloud. And it allows us to put a lot of good computing power against that very massive amount of raw data to give you actionable insights into what's going on, not just making you drink from a fire hose and trying to piece together simple little things. So we can give you that true control center type of environment. Now, one of our early customers with the new workforce intelligence products is Covenant Transportation Group. Covenant is a leading transportation and logistics company. They're very fortunate to have a seasoned veteran in this area, Doug Schreyer. I introduced him earlier. Had the opportunity to work with Doug. Very knowledgeable, sharp, brought in, has been able to drive dramatic improvement for Covenant. Covenant is very sensitive to any kind of fluctuations within their business model, their workforce, and logistics infrastructure. So, Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can share a little bit about what you've been able to do at Covenant.
Thanks. First, I think it's important to understand who Covenant Transportation Group is. So we are a group of a couple of different transportation assets from Covenant Transport, Southern Refrigerated Transport, and Star Transportation, who are your traditional trucking and trailer over-the-road transportation providers. So we also have a brokerage arm called Covenant Transport Solutions, and we have a affiliated company that participates within revenue equipment and sales. So with that, we are a holding company. I work for the holding company, and we have somewhere in the realm of 550 frontline employees that on a daily basis are doing mostly computer-aided work. So whether it's booking loads, talking to the customers, talking with our drivers, tracking freight, billing and collecting and paying our drivers and in-house employees, they spend the majority of their time with a combination of phone and computer in front of them. So where did that come into play? Where did continuous improvement come into play for CTG? The journey really started in 2010 on the backside of a consulting engagement. The transportation industry, as many industries, experienced a downturn, and a consulting group was brought in to get them back up and improving in the right areas and applying the resources in the right areas to increase profitability for the company and to take the company from losing money to making money. So with that, as many frontline consultants will do, they inserted employee logs, and employee logs were used to drive more knowledge to frontline managers, to drive more of our time from our frontline employees to our middle managers at the value-added activities. And those employee logs were great if we kept them focused, if we kept the follow-up to it and the accountability to it. But what you see with most initiatives, especially when they create manual recording and self-reporting, is the reliability of those began to fade. And the fatigue of our employees as they filled out these employee logs, they became fatigued. They saw less change, less improvement, and they didn't see the need for it. So they would pencil whip it, and the supervisors would allow that. So we wanted to go out and we wanted to give them a win. We said, okay, what could we do to improve the employees' interaction with our continuous improvement group at CTG? And the biggest one we could come up with is the replacement of the employee logs. And as Ron and Scott talked about, there are a whole bunch of different reports. We had all kinds of KPIs, and we could try to measure volumes of this activities from this system and volumes of this activity over here, and call volumes and activity volumes and backlogs. But at the end of the day, it was hard for our management team to have a clear vision, a clear view on did we have a good day or was it a bad day for our frontline employees. And if we couldn't view it, then our frontline employees didn't know, and we had that issue that we had to resolve. So we went out and we started looking for solutions. We looked at a bunch, and ultimately what we wanted to do as we looked at it and assessed it, we said, 99% of our work is at the computer and may use a computer with a phone, but we can manage it from the employee's desktop. So we want to understand what's going on the employee's desktop, how much time that they're spending at the desktop, how much time they're spending within productive applications, and then how much time are they spending away from their desktop and doing indirect activities, and ultimately while they're on their desktop or while they're away from it, where are they losing the time, right? What are the non-value activities that we have throughout the organization that we can reduce or eliminate to increase our value add? So with that was our challenge. Openspan came in to help us address this, and we really chose Openspan first because of ease of deployment, and I think at the time we were a little bit different with Openspan. Most people were using Openspan for automations, and rapid automations to improve the work that the employees were doing and to eliminate non-value added steps. However, we needed first to have that visibility, and then second to drive that rapid improvement. So Openspan brought in a unique ability to do both the overall view of our employees, and then second, as we see opportunities to streamline activities, to use Openspan as a rapid automation engine. So where do we start? And really we started globally. It was really the concept of chasing big wins from the aggregation of small marginal gains. The cost of utilization drain on the organization was big, it was large, and it wasn't because we didn't have great employees. It wasn't because we didn't have good supervisors or managers. It was because people, as a whole, if we only assign them, a half day's worth of work, they're going to make that half day, take a full day. And we had pacing issues, we had allocation issues, and we needed to do a better job from a resource planning perspective. We also needed them to understand, our frontline employees or our managers, to understand what the value-added activities were, especially those things that we can do more of to increase our returns. And what we were trying to drive towards was where we could increase our return of our time to 2x. So basically, after we take out all the variable costs associated with running freight, booking loads with our brokerage, or doing a multitude of other activities that we do internally, it is what truly makes the difference, and where can we use this to increase revenue, turn better profits, and improve what we're doing. So we were looking for that value-added approach. So essentially where we get down to, and what Openspan asked me to do, is to talk about the numbers. And we had some basic numbers up here of what a single individual at our company would do. First, we'd average around 2,000 hours worked throughout the year. It's a 50-week work year. And then our loaded rate per hour, after we added all the benefits and all the other things associated with employing an employee, were around $24 an hour. A lot of that's because we have, a very technically savvy workforce. They're just not a base call center. They're more of an operational center, so the pay was a little bit more. So we're at $24 an hour. Our goal utilization, and with a lot of goals where we weren't there, was for our employees to be 80% utilized on computer value-added work. So how much time did they spend on the computer and and productive applications. This isn't a true productivity, right? So we weren't saying if you did activity A, you earn 5 minutes, and if you did activity B, you earn 50 minutes, and summed up the total value earned and divided by value worked or time worked. This was just, hey, if we spend the time in the productive applications, we ultimately will deliver more value. So what was costing us, or what it would cost us at 80% goal utilization, is roughly $30 an hour for a full hour of utilization, or full hour within a production application. Let's go to the next slide. So on a single user, we weren't where we needed to be. We weren't at that 80% mark. We had employees that were 5% below the goal, some that were at goal or better, employees that were 10, 15, 20% below the goal. And a lot of that was not the employee not trying, but us assigning work incorrectly, or us not having the right processes, or what have you. So a 5% utilization drain on an employee was costing us $2,400. Not that big when you consider that we produce $720 million worth of revenue on an annual basis. But transportation's a business and an industry of pennies on the dollar. We have very thin margins on that $720 million worth of revenue. So what does that mean? Well, if I take that $2,400 for that single user, or if they were a 20% utilization drain $9,600, it meant I had an opportunity of my users, of about 400 that we've deployed Openspan on so far, between $960,000 and $3.8 million on an annual basis. With anything that was evenly distributed, we saw a group of employees that were at or above the mark, but we saw the majority of our employees below the mark. So, our mix was basically 10% between 5% and 0% being at goal, about 40% in that 10% range, and 40% at 15% drain. And then we had areas that had significant drain on utilization of 10%. Not all their faults. Some of it was deployment technology, lack of innovation, but we had opportunity out there to drive. So our global opportunity was about $2.4 million. So for those 400 users to date, we've captured basically 5% of that opportunity. So not where we want to be, right? So 5% is basically 1/3 of where we could be, sitting in about $960,000 on an annual basis that we brought back in, and then we applied it to value-based, right? So we said we want each one of our employees to return 2x of their time and their costs, so that $960,000 of improvements in utilization ultimately delivered $1.8 million of increased revenue to the bottom line. Now, at the same time, we were doing a bunch of other activities, but this is what we attributed to the Openspan approach. So go to the next slide. So after we figure this out and we know where we're at, we know where we have issues, what do? How do you apply the intelligence that Openspan gives you to drive change? And the first thing that we did was training. We had deployed our new transportation management suite. We had re-outfitted 4 of the 6 companies with new software that they needed to learn how to operate on. So training was a huge thing, right? Getting them trained on how to efficiently add value. Focus blitzes, sending a group of CI leaders into an area that has decreased utilization, an area that might be performing at 60% utilization, to figure out why they had the off-computer time, to figure out what we could do differently, to ensure that we were managing the management operating system correctly, that our supervisors were following up, that the employees understand their goals and their roles, that the employees knew where they fell at the end of the day. So those focus blitzes really helped us gain a lot of that opportunity back. Again, it helps us to deploy innovation, but when we deploy innovation, where we were at as a company was we said, okay, here's a business case scenario. We can improve efficiency by 10% by doing X. And we would go out there and we'd apply that innovation, in that integration of new technology. However, no one would go grab that 10% opportunity. So we had to do a better job realigning work activities to those people that were going under innovation to make sure they had enough on their plate and to make sure that they can deliver a full day's worth of work. And ultimately, as we were doing that, we added not just a standard activity, but the more value-added activities, opportunities we had to increase revenues. And then basically what's next as we continue the journey. So at first, Openspan is giving us great knowledge across the board. There's a lot of knowledge to take in, and we continue to dive deeper and deeper into that knowledge and making that knowledge into actions and applying those actions. So in conjunction with Openspan and the CI team, we continue to look at, increased opportunities to capture the utilization drain. Ultimately allowing us to do intelligent resource planning, and ultimately driving continued increase of value-added activities by each and every employee. So just ended with a quick quote here around measurement. Measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. If you can't measure something, you can't understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you can't improve it. And that's really where we were at. We had a decent understanding of it, but we were lacking in controlling it, and we were lacking on controlling our improvements. So Openspan has helped open that door to that new measurement.
And Doug, you've been a great partner in this journey, so thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
A couple things I wanted to hit on that you talked about. So one of the things, I've been through your organization. I've shadowed some folks. I've seen the great work you guys have done. You guys have a wonderful culture at Covenant. So the first thing we get a lot of times when we do these demos where we talk to people about this product, the first reaction, kind of knee-jerk, is, oh, big brother, right? But what you guys have done, the way you kind of provided this visibility to your team, it sounds like you found the right way to talk to it, right? Removing the manual logs and providing that visibility all the time for your team. But can you talk a little bit about that implementation and that rollout? Did you have to address some of those concerns, or were people worried about that kind of oversight? And if so, how did you kind of turn that over on its side to make this a good thing for the teams?
You always have resistors that are not going to like this, but your top performers and your middle performers they want to have, expectations. They want to be held accountable. They want to be recognized when they perform well. And when a management team does not have the capability to do that quickly enough or to understand where their people are, who's their best and who's their worst, it really can kind of kill your culture. Right? If somebody that's not doing great work is being recognized for not doing great work, then the rest of the organization tends to follow, and it sets a bad example. So right off the bat, we expect our employees to know where they're at and for them to be held accountable. We want our best employees. We want people that care. And also, we talked about 80% utilization. We're not driving to 95% utilization. I never see us doing that. I believe, when you're deploying people, there has to be breaks within the day, right? And outside of lunch and outside of your standard 10-minute break or 15-minute break, there has to be an opportunity to build rapport, to talk as a team, to build collaboration. And if you kill that by driving up utilization too high, you're ultimately going to cost yourself more than you would cost yourself in that utilization gain.
That's so important. That's a great point.
Excellent. All right. So continuing on, Mr. Kilgo, let's just kind of provide a little bit of insight into the workforce intelligence solution, kind of trying to tie all this together. So I think Doug did a great job, as we think about this product and how it's been developed, is really trying to make an out-of-the-box, visibility of your entire workforce. And I think Doug really took advantage of what we call time intelligence, which is getting that quick visibility into where your people are spending their time, right? Whether it's on the computer, whether it's off the computer, it's a quick view into the day in the life of your enterprise so that you can start to understand utilization. Are my people busy? Where are they spending their time? If so, how do I change that? How do I adjust it to get the most out of that group? How do I understand my top performers versus my lower performers? How do I understand and make changes so that I could use the analytics not just as a data stream, but convert that into intelligence and drive action against it? And Doug talked about some of the things that he did to drive action. The next phase, and this is something that we continue to work on, it's iterative, right? So where we go next with Covenant Transport is getting into a lot more application intelligence. So we talked early on about understanding what's happening when they're working in those production applications. To Doug's point, we want to maximize the time. We might not know exactly every single activity that they're doing, and we're not applying standards yet, but we want to understand, is that application working for the user? Is it doing its job? Is it manual? Is it redundant? Do I have to copy and paste and do a lot of manual activities to get my work done? So this is where you think about not just oversight of employees, but this is really digging into the application and the tools that they have to work with and finding those opportunities to make improvements. Maybe those are IT improvements, maybe they're automation improvements, maybe it's just reliability of that application. But now we're digging deeper, getting at a much more finer, granular level to see how that application is performing and how they're working within the application, finding automation opportunities, finding areas of improvement. And then finally, activity intelligence, that's kind of level 3 where it's pure granular. We're into every single step, every mouse click, every activity, every step, truly understanding from a process improvement perspective, what are those core activities that are impacting production? How did I do yesterday versus the day before versus the week before? Who are my top performers and what are the activities that are impacting them? One of the most important, I think, applications of this is in the call center. When you think about some of the ACD information and call disposition information that your organizations receive, you kind of know the how many, you know the output, you know when people are on the phone or off the phone, and you know what the call came in about. One of our favorite examples is financial services right now in banks. #1 call type or call disposition is a balance inquiry. Well, we know that it doesn't take 4 minutes to provide a balance inquiry to a member. So what else is happening on that call? And that's a lack of visibility. That's really when we talk about making the invisible visible. That's this lower level of insight that activity intelligence gets you to. Now we're looking at everything all of the time. We can actually see that, well, they did call about a balance inquiry, and they actually did an address change, they placed a trade, and they did 3 other things. So really going through and stepping through the organization and going deeper and deeper into the data. And I think that's important, right? You know, too many times big data is wonderful, it's a buzzword, and everybody goes after it and says, I want it, but it just is big data. What we're really trying to do here with workforce intelligence is to be very prescriptive and provide you golden nuggets of information that you can drive, you know, value-based decisions, fact-based decisions against and impact your organization. I think Doug's a great example of that, where he took the simplest of data from a big data pile or a big data cloud and was really able to show and demonstrate a payback with the product, and I think you're seeing some great results. So, gentlemen, anything I missed there from an overview perspective?
No, it's good. I like Doug's example about the fatigue of the workers and filling out the logs and stuff. Being able to do this, show the actual activity, not require the worker to take on that burden. When fatigue for the worker does sit in, they often will, in a call center especially, they'll just pick the generic call disposition, which totally skews the data. It makes it so that management doesn't really understand what the true call drivers are. Being able to see this level of information and draw your own conclusions regarding what's the real activity, what's the real call drivers, very powerful.
Great. And so Doug, I was going to say, Doug, question came in from chat real quick. The question was around an individual who has lots of analytics products, right? They have a lot of the technologies that we talked about, and one of their biggest challenges is kind of implementing change from that data. So the question was around, what are the things you had to do within your organization to realize the value? You talked about some of those as a highlight, but, what were those actionable items that you had to actually go out and do within your teams or push down to your supervisors? How did you actually see those values?
Training, right, is a first. If we have information out there that we think is easy to understand, we have to go out there and we got to validate it with the end user. Because if they don't understand it, if they don't know what it's telling them to do or how to act, then you'll never gain that value that's there. So training first, and then continuous improvement, change initiatives. It's never easy. The old adage that pain, or that change registers as pain in most people's brain, and that there's a rare couple of people that actually enjoy change, but everyone else hates it. It's really about understanding the person's openness to what we're seeing within the data and their ability to create new habits on the floor. And we use some other programs in conjunction with this to help drive those correct behaviors and enforce those correct behaviors on the floor, because frequently, as being somebody responsible for corporate change, you go and you say, okay, if we just did X, Y, and Z, we would gain, this huge sum of money. And everyone sits in the meeting, they all shake their heads, they all agree. And you walk out the next day, you go out and watch on the floor as they don't do X, Y, and Z, and you're trying to fill those gaps. So communication, training, and then really figuring out how you get buy-in from key individuals that are going to drive it. So we use a program that helps roll our goals down through the organization, called 4DX, or 4 Disciplines of Executions, and that really helps drive the behaviors that we need to get the change initiated.
Great. All right, Ron, that's all we have from the headquarters here. If you want to wrap us up.
Okay, great. If there's any other questions, send them on through and we'll try to address them offline. Again, just to remind you, we will be sending you the slide deck and presentation recording from today's webinar via email. If you're interested in seeing a live demo of the Openspan automation solutions, you can visit www.openspan.com/demo. We're always open to answering any questions you may have or getting you in touch with the right contacts to help you. You can email us at info@openspan.com. Thank you for attending.